Veterinary Association along with the World Veterinary Association. On panel today, we have with us the expert speaker from Australia, Dr. Navneet Dhand, then Dr. Umesh Balaji Sonatake, Dr. Ilang from Nagaland, Dr. Chirantan Kadyan, who is the president of Indian Veterinary Association, and Dr. Ponu Padyan. So I welcome you all to this webinar series that we started on 20th of April. And this all started during the lockdown period because of the problem that everyone knows, that the crisis is very grave. Almost all parts of the world is facing this COVID problem, and some success have been seen over some of the issues, but still we are far away from getting the vaccines and some of the important aspects. And the topic which has been given by Dr. Navneet is very pertinent on this occasion, where the problem, not only this we have to think ahead that what could be the next. So we should be prepared for the next pandemic and how we have to strengthen ourselves, different areas where we have to work out and be prepared for the next pandemic. We don't hope that something abrupt will come out, but it is one precautionary, or it is one preparedness that every corner of the world should be prepared to fight against the emerging pathogens which is in nature is going on. So in this series, I request Dr. Ilang to introduce the speaker, who is well-known personality in the field of public health. He has contributed a lot. So let's have something about him. Dr. Ilang, please.
Good morning, respected veterinarians of this great country. From the remote eastern state of India, I am Dr. Ilang, Vice President, Indian Veterinary Association, East Zone, contesting the prestigious VCI election 2020, willing and committed for the revival of veterinary profession in the country under the dynamic leadership of Dr. Chirantan Kadyan. Please vote for Dr. Kadyan and team. It is a great privilege for me to introduce our own renowned scientist from Australia, Dr. Navneet Dhand, Associate Professor, University of Sydney, who has several awards under his name. The latest being 2016, he was awarded Commendation for Recognition of the Outstanding Academic Achievement in Epidemiology and Control of Infectious Diseases, and several other awards over the years. At the moment, he is the project leader in the development of field epidemiology training programs for veterinarians in the United Nations FAO, and he also leads 4 other epidemiology studies across the world. It is very important to add that he is passionate about epidemiology, a member of epidemiology chapter of the Association College of Veterinary Scientists, very interested in endemic, emerging, and zoonotic diseases. And here today, I warmly welcome you, sir, with your topic, preventing the next pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You are
all right. Can
we
start the presentation, please? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me. Just it's always a pleasure to interact with my friends and colleagues from India. Not sure if all of you know me, but I'm originally from the Punjab state of India. This is a picture from my school. I worked at the University, Punjab Agriculture University, and in the Punjab Animal Husbandry Department for about 10 years in total, and then moved to Australia at the University of Sydney to conduct my PhD in 2004, and I've been working there as a lecturer or on other academic positions since 2007. So this is a kind of outline of
We at Team IVA
about emerging infectious diseases and why do we need to have epidemiology skills and what do we need to do to ensure that a next pandemic doesn't happen. So I guess you know that, but just to introduce what are the emerging infectious diseases. So these are the diseases that are newly recognized or newly evolved. It is possible that they might have occurred previously, but they could have increased in incidence or expanded its geographical or host range. So either they are newly evolved or newly recognized diseases, or they might have occurred in the past, but have increased in incidence or their geographic range. There are some other diseases that are re-emerging, like rabies and TB, that used to occur in the past, then were sometime controlled, and their incidence decreased substantially, and now they are re-emerging in several countries. So majority of the emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. Now, it is now well known that about 60% of the infectious diseases of people are zoonotic, and more than 75% of the emerging infectious diseases that have originated in the past 30, 40 years, they are zoonotic. So you can see majority of them are zoonotic, so they originate either in the wildlife and they spill over usually to any domestic animal species or other species, and before spilling over to humans. So, take the example of COVID-19 pandemic that is occurring. It is currently a human infection and human infectious disease that is spreading between humans. But where did it originate? The disease originally occurred in people that were in direct contact with a wet market in Wuhan in China. We don't know the full story yet, but it looks like that the disease jumped from an animal, wild animal, to humans, in that market, and now the virus is capable of spreading between humans. So, and that's how it works. So the majority of the emerging infectious diseases originally in wildlife, and then they spill over to human population. I'll give you some examples. So this is Hendra virus. This is a disease that is present in Australia, and I have been working on it for a few years now. So the virus is present. It's caused by paramyxovirus that is present in flying foxes. From flying foxes, it spreads to horses, and then from horses it spreads to human. So the original outbreak occurred in 1994, and since then it has occurred sporadically in Australia. Over the years, there was a spike into 2011, but usually there are only a few cases of the disease each year. And so far, it has affected around 102.
We at Team IVA
Humans, and the case fatality rate of this virus is quite high. About 75% of the horses and 57% of the humans have died due to the disease. So it is quite deadly, but it doesn't occur that commonly. So usually we have only a few cases of the disease. You can see less than 5, other than 2011. So similarly, there was a disease, a related disease in Malaysia and Singapore in 1998, 99. So it was caused by a similar virus, and it also occurs in flying foxes. The flying foxes are the natural reservoirs of the virus, and then the bats that are roosting in fruit trees on pig farms, they transmitted the virus to pigs and caused outbreaks in pigs, which became then the reservoir. So from the flying foxes, it spread to pigs, and then the pigs transmitted it to humans that were in contact with pigs at those farms, or in Singapore, where they were transported, and at the abattoir there was spread of the disease. Again, you can see the same thing. So from wildlife, the disease spreading to domestic livestock and then to humans. Another disease that occurred in 2003, which is a SARS coronavirus. It was very similar to the current COVID-19 pandemic that is occurring. So the same very similar virus. It appears that it spread from flying foxes to civet cats, which are cat-like animals, and then to humans. It spread to 26 countries at that time, and affected more than 8,000 people, and 774 people died. So that looked like a large number at that time. Now you compare that to what is happening with COVID-19. It has killed more than 200,000 people around the globe, and has affected so many people in more than 200 countries now. So essentially all of the countries are now affected. So it's very similar virus, very similar mechanism of transmission. With COVID, we don't know what is the intermediate animal. There are speculations about some animals, but there's no certainty yet. So more work needs to be done, but you get the idea. So spreading from wildlife or from animals to humans. Same thing happened with H1 and H5N1 avian influenza. There are a number of experts in the audience today who know much more about avian influenza than I know, but it spread from wild birds to domestic birds, and then human came in contact with birds, and potentially through other animals they contracted the disease. So it occurred in several countries in those years, in the early 2000s. And similar to that, there was we all know that the H1N1 pandemic influenza that occurred in 2009. That was a sort of a special virus. It was a cocktail. You can say khichdi of a number of viruses. It had fragments of bird flu and for human flu and swine flu, and it was the first pandemic in my life, I guess, and you would have seen the impact of the disease around the world at that time. Again, the same situation. The virus is spreading from virus spread from animals to humans. And same thing happening with the Ebola virus. The Ebola is transmission occurs when humans consume the flesh of fruit bats and the fresh meat of animals that are fed on fruit bats. So either fruit bats directly are consumed by people, or they consume meat from animals that they have consumed meat of fruit bats. And this was one of my PhD students, and she investigated, and she found the exposure of Ebola virus in domestic pigs in Uganda. So there may be another link that is still needs to be investigated. Now the question is that if a majority of the emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, now what is the best way to protect humans from them? What is the most sensible way to protect humans? So how can we protect humans if the animals are the source of majority of these infectious diseases? So I guess this is the most sensible way. You detect. So this is how these diseases are spreading. Usually they are in the wildlife initially, and then spread to domestic animal populations, and then spread to humans. So that's the red curve here. So what we actually need to do is to detect and contain these emerging infectious diseases here while the virus is still spreading, causing small outbreaks in the domestic wildlife populations or in the domestic animal population. But what we are actually doing is that we start worrying about the virus when it enters the human population. So this is, for example, the start of the epidemic in humans. That's where we start to worry about it. And then we try our best to control it. And now you can see how much damage it has done. We had to shut down our countries, our economies. It has killed so many people, affected so many people. So that is too late, So if you really want to control these diseases, you have to act early. You have to act here at this stage rather than acting here in this stage. It is already too late. The virus is already spread to the human population. And, this time the virus is much more deadly, much more, this COVID-19, this coronavirus, this is much more deadly than many other viruses, and is also spreads very quickly. But there have been many other viruses in the past that have had much higher mortality than this virus. So you think about the situation, if a virus emerges that is as transmissible as COVID, as this coronavirus, and has a mortality like Ebola virus, for example, that would be disastrous for us, right? So we need to make sure as a human species, we make sure that we try to focus our attention in this phase rather than trying to, then control the disease in this phase. Now, how do we do that? We already know in India that, early intervention is the key to success. And if you train people early on, they are going to be more successful than others. And we have also seen in this pandemic, if you act early, like New Zealand has done, South Korea has done, Australia has done a good job. Taiwan has done a good job. Many countries acted early. They started diagnosing the disease, detecting the disease early on. Even though it has spread to the human population, still they were able to control it much better than other countries that started late. So the idea is that if you want to tackle these emerging infectious diseases, you tackle them here to protect the people. To protect our Homo sapiens, you need to make sure that we actually control our diseases here. So how can we achieve that? How would, what would we have to do to make sure that we protect humans from the disastrous effect of these emerging infectious diseases before they are able to spread to the human population? A number of ways to do that, but I think one of the best approaches is to train the animal health workforce, train our veterinarians and paraveterinarians to become animal disease detectives or field epidemiologists, so that they can conduct surveillance and outbreak investigation. So field epidemiology training programs are running in several countries. They train veterinarians and paraveterinarians to conduct disease surveillance and outbreak investigation. To give you a bit of an idea of what the difference in these approaches is, that you can, there is an analogy with the police detectives or police force or our intelligence agencies. What is their role? During normal times, their role is to actually conduct surveillance so that they can and detect or identify the criminals or the terrorists before they are able to act, right? That's the surveillance. But, despite their best efforts, sometimes the criminals are able to commit the crime, they are able to act and, create problems. But in that time, at that instance, the role of the police detective or the police force is to then neutralize that those criminals, neutralize those terrorists, and make sure they understand how to act and make sure that they are not able to cause a major damage. So similarly, our animal disease detectives have broadly these two roles. So in normal times, they conduct disease surveillance so that they are able to detect diseases early on before they are able to spread by collecting data about diseases, about the pathogens or diseases that are occurring in the animal population. But they also have the skills to control an outbreak once it occurs. So if the pathogen is able to cause an outbreak, then the disease detectives also have the skills to contain the outbreak, to make sure that it doesn't spread to other regions. So or other countries, like the situation with COVID-19 or African swine fever. So with African swine fever, we know that this is not a zoonotic disease, but it is a very, very deadly, and it is a huge significance for food security. The virus just started in China in August 2018, and spread to several countries in Southeast Asia. First spread to all these different states of China, and then spread to several countries in Southeast Asia. So it has actually decimated the pig population, so killed 1/4 of the world's pig population already. So you can think of the impact that would have on farmer livelihoods and food security in the region. So the disease detectives not only work on emerging infectious diseases that are zoonotic, but all of these skills are also required to control and prevent the occurrence of transboundary diseases like African swine fever. Now, what are these FETPV programs, or the field epidemiology training programs? How they are different from academic programs that are run by various universities? There are some differences and some similarities. They learn epidemiology. If you enroll in masters in epidemiology or PhD in epidemiology, they both learn epidemiology. But in the field epidemiology programs, the focus is actually on the field skills. So most of the time, more than 70% of the time, he actually spent in the field conducting real life studies than in the classroom. And the participants learn while working in the ministry. So for example, majority of the people are who are already working in animal husbandry department. So they are not, they are already working, and they are already facing problems, and they are learning on the job. So these are in-service training programs, training veterinarians and para-veterinarians to detect emerging infectious diseases or other diseases, control these diseases, conduct surveillance, conduct outbreak investigation. And majority of these programs are hosted by the government animal husbandry departments rather than by the universities. Though some programs are hosted by universities, but universities are associated with most of these programs. But the main, the home of these programs, you can say, is actually the animal health ministries or animal husbandry ministries in various countries. So I have been working with them with the field epidemiology training programs for about 6 years ago, when an FAO asked me to organize some training programs in East Africa. So we organized workshops and training field epidemiology training programs for in Tanzania and Kenya in 2015 and 16. For veterinarians from 4 East African countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda. So they conducted a follow-up training in 2016, and then conducted further training in last year. And that's where I started working with the field epidemiology training programs. And then FAO organized 2 workshops in 2018. So the first workshop in February 2018 in Rome to take stock of the situation They invited probably 80, 70, 80 people from around the world to review what is going on in the field epidemiology space, to learn from their experiences. And then they invited a smaller group in July to work further on developing competencies and curriculum for field epidemiology training programs. So after these workshops, they signed an agreement with me to review these, put it all together, whatever we had learned from these workshops, review these programs, identify competencies, and develop curriculum for these field epidemiology training programs. So that work has now been completed. So we have already conducted the review. So these are some countries where these field epidemiology training programs are running. So they started actually in early 2000s in Thailand with the avian influenza outbreak. So the original role of these field epidemiology training programs was to train veterinarians to control the avian influenza outbreaks. That started with that, but these programs then became a bit more formal, and they then started expanding, and then they established a regional program. Again, it is hosted by the Department of Livestock Development. Now it was initially a 2-year program, and now is a modular program, and has trained people from several countries in Asia. At the same time, there were similar programs were established in the Philippines in around 2006, and it went through a number of changes, but it is now run by the Philippine College of Veterinary Epidemiologists. It is a tiered program. You could have an associate, or you could become a diplomat, or get a fellowship. So there's a range of options available. And around the same time in 2009, Vietnam started their program, but it is run by the Vietnam Department of Animal Health. It is a smaller program of 3 weeks of classroom work and a 6-week field project. Around the same time, I guess, in China started the program. It's China FETPV. It's run by the Ministry of Agriculture in China. It is a 2-year program along with an executive training component. Cambodia joined the bandwagon in around 2012, and they run by the Ministry of Forestry. And it is a 5-week program, so around 1 month plus 6 months extended training. So one thing is probably obvious when I'm talking about these programs is there is a lot of variation. So if you meet someone who says that I'm a field epidemiology trained person, you don't know what they would know. You have no idea what their skills would be, because there are some programs that are, this is a smaller program with 5 weeks. There is a 3-month program. This is a 2-year program. This is a 3-week classroom component. So there is a huge variation in how these programs are run, which some of the variation is understandable, because the countries have different needs, different requirements. But if we don't know if a graduates from these programs, what kind of skills they would have. Indonesia started just recently in 2018, and they have a 1-year non-degree program plus a 2-year master's level program. So the FAO is also running an in-service applied field epidemiology training program in Africa. So David Kesslin, some of you might have worked with him. He worked in Southeast Asia quite a bit, also organized training in Nepal. He has been heavily involved in this work, as was Mother Dhingra. She's originally from Haryana, and she works with the FAO now, and she was quite heavily involved in the original the establishment of these ISAVET training in Africa. All right, so we reviewed all of these programs, what they are doing, and we also discussed based on the discussion and based on the reviews that we conducted, we identified that there are several gaps and the several challenges that are facing these programs. So one is quite obvious that the quality and standards are quite variable. They're from a three-week program to 2-year programs. And when we interviewed their program directors, one of the issues they identified that the suitable learning materials and case studies are not available. So it is difficult for them to create own case studies and learning materials. They are available for human field epidemiology training programs. But they are not suitable. Some of them are suitable, but not all of them. So not all the materials from human epidemiology program can be, translated into for veterinary programs. And they identified that we have facilitators or mentors. So facilitators are the people who actually teachers or trainers in the ministries. They train these field epidemiologists. They have limited opportunities for upskilling. So once they get training, there is no continuing program professional development. Now we are running this CPD program. It is quite important to have these ongoing continuing education programs, but they identified that they have very limited opportunities, and to upscale themselves. They also identified that the teaching method used in these programs are quite old, like this just lecture based. They have to be quite practical and applied for them to make sense. That's the original motivation for establishing a field epidemiology program. So that was realized that we need to update that or upgrade the skills of the trainers in teaching methods. And they were concerned that sometimes the program don't remain applied, particularly, they can become very theoretical, like it may not remain. The actual motivation, as I said, for these field epidemiology program is to make sure that they remain applied, that the majority of the component is field component, that they do hands-on work, hands-on outbreak investigation, conduct surveillance. But it was realized that many of the programs are becoming a sort of academic programs where there's a lot of theory and less of applied hands-on work. And this is quite obvious. There is a limited capacity to work at the animal-human interface. We know that majority of the diseases are spreading from animals to humans. So we need people who can work with not only for animal diseases, but they can also work with their colleagues in the human health department, so medical doctors, to control emerging infectious diseases like COVID-19 or re-emerging diseases like rabies. So there's a one health component. There's a substantial role that veterinarians have to play in controlling these diseases, but that was observed that it is not happening. So we are working in our silos. So animal husbandry people are working with animal husbandry people or with animals, and human medical doctors are just focusing on humans. So there is a very limited interaction or collaborations between them. Obviously, there were issues of funding and sustainability that we identified. So that was the first activity that we conducted. And because of the variable quality and standards, so FAO had asked me to actually define core competencies that are required. So in these workshops, we had conducted a lot of brainstorming sessions to understand what are the actual skills that are required for a field epidemiologist, right? So we wanted to, have some standardization internationally of these programs, so that if somebody tells you that I'm a field epidemiologist, you know that what kind of skills they would have. So there was a lot of brainstorming sessions happened in these workshops, but then eventually FAO asked me to put them all together. So that work has now been completed. We have developed the guidelines and finalized the competencies that are required for field epidemiologists. We have established sort of 3 tiers of programs: frontline, intermediate, and advanced programs. So these guidelines are available, and then we have identified what kind of skills they would be required, that would be required for these field epidemiology. So these are, for example, the three main domains or competency domains for frontline workers, so to conduct surveillance, field investigation, and One Health. But there is a little bit more for the intermediate competency, where they have also epidemiologic methods and data analysis and a little bit of modeling. As I said, the third role activity that the FAO had asked me to do was to develop guidelines for establishing a program. So, for example, if India wants to start a new field epidemiology training program, they don't have any program at the moment, then what are the guidelines? So how would you, could you give a step-by-step approach that they could just follow that approach to establish a program? So we have completed that work as well. I could have showed you, this is, I can't share you at the moment, but that work has been completed and the FAO has already accepted the documents. So these guidelines have, 6 or 7 steps, including the step for preliminary scoping and planning, how to establish a program, how to train your mentors and facilitators, how to monitor the program once it is established, and how to make that it remains sustainable. And all of these people have made substantial contributions to the development of these guidelines. So they are under review by the FAO at the moment and will be published hopefully later this year in multiple languages. So based on the work that I had done with the FAO in identifying these gaps, so I was thinking, what if I have some opportunity to actually implement the recommendations that we have made? So we have developed the guidelines, made some recommendations, developed the curriculum as well for field epidemiology. Now I was wondering what if I could get an opportunity to implement everything that we have done. So then there was a call for funding from the Australian government for a proposal for infectious disease detection and response program. It was actually focused primarily for human health, but I decided to submit a program focusing on animal health. Giving the same reason that I discussed early on, that majority of these diseases are spreading from animals to humans. So if you are going to detect and train people, or if you are going to detect these diseases, or develop a program for control of the diseases, you have to do something upstream in the animal population. So that project has fortunately been successful. So they have now funded that program. It's a $4.3 million, not billion, sorry. Working on, you will be working in 11 countries in Southeast Asia. So essentially, pretty much all the countries from Australia, starting from India and into Australia. So between India and Australia, I think most of the countries are involved, except a couple of them. And we have been fortunate to involve all of the vet schools in Australia and New Zealand, and one vet school from US in this project. We have around 38 veterinary epidemiologists from these vet schools, as well as from these target countries in Southeast Asia, from Vietnam, from Laos, Philippines, Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Timor-Leste, and other countries. So in this, what we are going to do in this project, it just started last week. So we are planning to, the aim is to fill the gaps that we identified in the FAO project. So it kind of flows on very smoothly from the work that we have done for the FAO. So we identified that there is a problem with the learning materials and case studies, and we are going to develop them. So we are going to develop 25 to 30 modules and and case studies based on the real life examples from Southeast Asia, in partnership with our partners. And there was we will then enroll veterinarians from, or at least 20, select 20 veterinarians from each country and train them, enroll them to undertake our modules, and then allocate them projects to conduct with the animal health department or husbandry departments. And we had identified that there are limited opportunities for upskilling facilitators and mentors. And to solve that, we are organizing training for the facilitators or the trainers in these programs, to train them in epidemiology, not only in epidemiology, but also in teaching methods, because we had seen that the teaching methods needs to be upgraded. And there is a limited capacity to work at the animal health, human health interface. So we are organizing these workshops that include One Health training, leadership training, and communication training for facilitators and mentors. And obviously that will solve the problem of variable quality and standards, because we are going to develop these materials that all of these programs would be able to use in their teaching. So these materials will be standalone, so they could be used by anyone who is not enrolled in the programs, but in these programs could also use them for their training, in their classroom training. So that's hopefully by the end of this project, 3 years. So all of these programs would be much more strengthened, and that they will train would have a better capacity to deal with the emerging infectious diseases, to control those diseases at the animal, in the animal population before they kind of spread to the human population. And hopefully we will be able to expand that to India. So we are in the process of developing. This is just a news story from the Hindu, just from yesterday. We are in the process of expanding that collaboration to India. We have just started some preliminary work with Navneet in Bangalore, as well as with the National Institute of Epidemiology. In addition, there are 2 universities involved. One is Gadwasu from North, and Ten was from Chennai. And also, Indian Veterinary Association has supported this endeavor and provided their much needed support to conduct this program. So this planning is going on. So this planning to establish a program on the similar program as our work, running in Southeast Asia, but even much better in India, to train veterinarians and para-veterinarians in field epidemiology, so that they are able to detect and emerging infectious diseases, can prevent the spread of these diseases, and also obviously control other diseases. Given I'm originally from India, I know there is a very limited understanding of the subject in India. So when people ask me about India, I can tell there is a huge capacity in microbiology, molecular biology, the international standard people with in virology, for example. But there is whenever I visit Gadwasu, they tell me that we need more training in epidemiology. So hopefully this will be established, and this will fill a major gap in epidemiology training in India. So thank you very much for joining the webinar, and thank you very much to IVA for organizing this webinar.
Thank you, sir, for your nice presentation. We are getting very good response at here for your presentation. Some questions are there. One question is from Navneet. He is asking about, can you highlight on some effective One Health program in India? or all over global? How we can go for that?
Yeah, sure. There is a, I guess Mother could probably talk a bit more about it, but I guess the biggest programs internationally in this space are funded by Emerging Pandemic Threat program of USAID agency. One of the program they funded is it's called the Predict program. It had a similar focus. They collected samples from hundreds of thousands of animals, wildlife, and humans to identify and detect novel viruses, and they have actually detected hundreds of viruses in the that are novel viruses. Any of those could be zoonotic. But you know that's a good example of One Health. Our program is complementary to what they are doing, or their program actually got shut down very recently, late last year. But you know we are focusing more on the frontline training of frontline workers who are working in the field, where their focus was more on training lab people to detect those viruses. Both are important. The skills in lab are crucial if you want to diagnose these diseases, but the skills in field epidemiology are also important to these diseases, detect these identify sick animals and collect samples, submit samples. Control outbreaks before they're able to spread.
Sir, sir, are you organizing some animal detective trainings, disease detective trainings for Indian veterinarians? Hello, Navneet sir, are you getting me? Okay, Dr. Chirandan sir, please take the charge for the session.
Honorable Dr. Navneet Ji, we are highly again thankful second time to you for obliging